lovely humans, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be, hi, I'm Jamie. I'm your online wedding planner. I'm here to help you plan your wedding. Today's video, we're gonna talk about flips. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is using one area, one space, one room at your venue for two purposes, for your ceremony and your reception. And I cannot believe we have made it 6 years without making a video on this. This is one of the most logistical situations that you can have at a wedding. So it's high time we talked about it. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. So as I just said a moment ago, a flip is when one space is used for two different purposes. And it's such a short, little, tiny, seemingly innocuous word that really is a complicated procedure. Because imagine it, if you will. You've got your ceremony all set up with your chairs and your aisle and your altar, and it's so cute. And your DJ is like there to like play the music. You go in, you come back out, and then all the chairs have to be removed. Tables need to be brought in. The correct amount of chairs need to go around each table. We've got centerpieces, we've got table numbers, we've got maybe escort cards. That gets complicated. We've got glassware, we've got plates. We've got napkins. A lot of things need to go onto these tabletops. Potentially you have a buffet table you need to set up. Essentially, what usually other vendors have hours to do for a setup, right? They can just go in and set up your reception for 2 hours or whatever, is now squished down into whatever time is available during your cocktail hour instead. Now, let me say for the record, if you were working with a professional flip crew, like if your caterer offers this, or if your venue offers a flip crew, you usually don't need to worry about this at all because there are plenty of professionals on site that have done this before. I'm talking to my DIY friends, okay? I'm talking to my ones that are like, oh, it's fine, we'll get it figured out. But we're gonna have to talk for a few minutes first to make sure you are as prepared as possible. Otherwise, you're gonna have some family members and or friends like really mad at you. Because this is a lot. So with that in mind, I came up with 4 things you need to go over. Very simple, right? 4 sounds so simple and like not difficult at all. 4 things that you need to have prepared ahead of time to make this as seamless as possible. This is where I will recommend the free service called allseated.com. I love Allseated so very much for so many reasons. In fact, I did a whole review video on it. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it right here if you want to check it out. But basically, it's an overhead layout for venues. Now, your venue can go and enter their measurements to have those pre-submitted, so you could just like plug and play. Or if you can get your dimensions of the space, you can use that as well. And then everything is done to scale. So you need a layout for where all these tables and chairs are going, which is pretty simple. You don't have to go as far as using Allseated or something like that. I just really love this resource because this is exactly what it's designed to do, is to help streamline moments like this. So it tells your rental company or the venue where to set up the chairs, or if you're having volunteers do them. And you'll kind of see that the theme of today's video is like, keep it simple, silly. And here's what we need to see on that layout. The ceremony one's a little bit more self-explanatory, although it would be great to see how many chairs you want in each row and how many aisles you want. But again, that one's not too complicated. Those are usually preset. But again, that was usually not too complicated. Once you figure that out, it's pretty much easy breezy, beautiful cover girl from there. But it's important to get the table layout ahead of time because we want to know where your family members are seated. We want to know where the wedding party is going to be seated. We want to know where your aunts and your uncles, like all the people get spicy if they're put in the wrong location or if they're not close to the couple, and by people, I usually mean like older relatives. We don't want that getting all messed up, okay? Especially because you worked really hard in the seating chart. I'm overemphasizing my point. We have to know where these tables go. We also need to know how many chairs are at each table. There's this really cool trick that I learned at one of the first weddings that I worked, and I use it to this day. It's fantastic. And this works if you are also doing only one set of chairs instead of 2, and you're using them for your ceremony, but you also need to use them for your reception, is to go around and either using a slip of paper or a Post-it note, write the number of how many chairs go at that table. I prefer Post-its because they're a little bit brighter and they kind of stand out from your typical white linen. So let's say table 1 has 8, you would write 8 on the Post-it and stick it on top of that tabletop. Table 2 has 6, you write it down, stick it on table 2. And that way when all these little worker bees are running around moving all these chairs, all they have to do is refer to the Post-it that's on there and they don't have to find someone who's in charge of all this to get their questions answered. This is also immeasurably helpful if you want anything beyond chairs placed at the tables. So if there's any sort of place setting, such as napkins or plates or china or anything like that, even individual favors, we're gonna need to know how many belong at each table. We also need to know where the dance floor is gonna be. It may not be a physical floor. I do get this question a lot. You do not have to rent a physical dance floor. The only reason we ever even slightly recommend it is if your entire reception is on grass and you want something solid for those in heels to like, why am I miming it? You get it. This is miming, dancing on a dance floor. But if there isn't like a clearly delineated space, we want to make sure we leave that open with the tables as well. The second thing you're going to need is a dedicated crew to do this. I always say that a flip requires a lot of bodies moving really fast in a short amount of time. But also who they are matters. If they are professional, if they are vendors, if they do this all the time, if they work for the venue, I totally trust what they got going on. I am not concerned about it. If they are your family members and friends, then my concern, I was going to say skyrockets, but that feels a little bit dramatic. It does a little jump. And that's why it's very important to have this layout pre-done and have multiple copies of it, right? So whomever is doing the flip for you knows exactly what they should be doing. You need a point person for this crew. You need someone whom you've sat down with and talked through every single one of these details. This is not one of those, hey, go ahead and figure it out on your own. I made maps. Good luck. Okay, this is not where we do that. In fact, if you have not watched the super old video that I made called The Most Overlooked Part of Your Wedding Day, you need to go watch that. That is of the utmost importance, and I stand by that. I actually just rewatched that recently, and I was like, dang girl, you nailed a lot of those. Most couples have no idea how arduous this is. But in that video, I talked about letting the volunteers know what they're doing, right? And letting them know that they're doing it. And we'll never forget this one event where we were told that the aunt would be doing the centerpieces and the dessert table. And then our lead planner went to her the night of the rehearsal and said, hey, so I hear you're our point person for centerpieces and the dessert table. And the aunt went, what? No, I don't know what you're talking about. And then midnight that night, we received a very long email from our client being like, here are all the things that we need you to do tomorrow. Yeah, so pre-communication is very important, especially if they are not used to doing this. And having a point person is of the utmost importance. And again, ideally that they know they're doing it and that you've talked to them about this ahead of time. Number 3, let's talk about pre-setting things. Now, some venues will say, hey, why don't we have your tables completely set up and we'll just like scooch them off to the side a little bit and you can have your ceremony and then we'll just drag them out, right? But a lot of couples don't like that look. They don't like that vibe. Like, no one wants cupcakes next to the altar. I mean, maybe some people do, but I personally would not prefer that vibe either. But especially if you're in a very small or more enclosed space, it kind of feels like you're there for the dress rehearsal, right? And some people this doesn't bother at all, but if you know, you know. Like, if you walk in and all the tables are there, but it's preset for the ceremony, kind of loses, in my opinion, a little bit of the magic. And that may be unpopular, but I really prefer to make it not feel like guests are seeing behind the scenes, you know, like peeking behind Wizard of Oz's curtain. I want it to feel a little bit more magical than that. But if there's any way to have things as preset as possible out of people's field of vision, that's fantastic. Usually that means that it's a table with a tablecloth and the centerpiece already on it and the table number with it. So it's very easy to move everything to shuffle it into place based off the table layout that you made multiple copies of and passed off to your point person to help your crew run it, right? Okay, so that's what presetting those tables look like. I have seen venues want to preset with like glassware and plates and all those sorts of things, and that I'm usually not a very big fan of because as you can imagine, if you're picking up a table with 8 cups, some of those suckers might fall over. And then the problem is compounded when some of those have water in them and then it spills all over the tablecloth and then we're trying to find a hairdryer at 4:30 when your ceremony starts at 5, right? Just like not where we want our priorities to be. But the alternative to not presetting things means that we're rolling out tables, placing tablecloths, putting centerpieces on top of the table, putting table numbers on, napkins, and anything else that you would like. Which segues perfectly into item number 4 we gotta talk about, Streamline. Okay? This is not a bud vase situation, in my opinion. For those of you who don't know, there's a style of centerpieces where instead of having one big main centerpiece, instead you do a collection of bud vases with a handful of florals in each of them. It cuts down on cost. It gives like a lot of visual interest to your centerpiece. There's just a lot of great reasons to be going with bud vases. This is not one of those times, okay? This is the time where I want one single centerpiece, okay? And I just want to go kerplunk, like directly in the middle of the table. I don't want to be messing around with like making sure the heights are all correct or like laying the greenery around the base of all your things. No. If you're doing a flip, keep it simple, silly. You know, this would also probably not be the situation where you are going to want to have all of the cutlery, plates, and glassware on the tables. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, we don't want those falling over if they have water in them, right? And this would absolutely be a scenario where I would say do not do escort cards because that gets so complicated. And the only reason I would ever say this is okay is if you were dealing with a venue that often does a flip and often does plated meals, including escort cards, and they're like, we got this, it's not a problem, don't stress about it. And they handle it for you. I would never ask a volunteer to handle a flip with escort cards, with specific chairs for the guests so the servers know where to bring out the plated meal. So you're watching all this and you're like, Jamie, that sounds great, but I really want my plates on the table. Like I have a vision of what I want this to look like and I still want to pull this off. Like I want to have my cake and eat it too in this scenario. So here's what you need to do in that scenario. You are either going to have to increase your volunteers that are doing this for you or you're going to have to pay for a crew to come in and do this. Now, this is something that I don't see a lot of people talking about, and I feel like this is like a really great hack. Did you know that you can hire just servers for your wedding day? Like just servers. Usually you get them through a bartending company. So even if you don't need a bar or a bartender, oftentimes they will have servers that will come out and do some of this stuff. Now they have minimums for how long they're supposed to work. I think it's usually like 4 hours, but it could be as long as 8 hours. The last time I checked, it's about $25 per hour per server. Of course, this could vary in your area, but let's say you hire 4 servers for 8 hours. That's not bad. That's about $800, right? Which sounds like a lot of money because it is, right? Like we're not knocking it. That's almost $1,000. If you add one more server, that's $1,000. However, like we've always talked about on this channel, you either spend the time or you spend the money. So if you were unwilling to streamline, which I get, I mean, your girl has champagne taste on a beer budget like all the time. Okay, that is the story of my life. I'm considering getting it tattooed on my person, all right? But sometimes it's important to recognize when it just needs to be left to the professionals, right? So if it's my client asking for my opinion, then yeah, I'm gonna tell them that we should probably find the $800. We should probably find a way of getting some professionals in there because 1, that's not my job. I can't physically move that many tables. And 2, we really don't want your guests doing it either. It is one of those situations where I talk about this I think in my pet peeves video, where I'm like, could you just go do this really complicated thing that sounds really simple to me because I'm not an expert in this field? And could you just go make that happen really quickly on top of your regular duties that we've hired you to do, but don't slack on the duties that we've already given you? And clients don't intend to do this, couples don't intend to do this, but there are obviously elements of running a wedding day that are probably a little bit more complicated than you think. So sometimes it's worth it to just hire the crew. So as a wrap up, what is a flip? It's using one space for 2 different purposes. You like how I flip my hand to like really emphasize the flipping? You're going to want to have a killer layout, multiple copies printed, with the number of chairs at each table. In an ideal situation, you will be working with a professional crew, either hired through a bartending company or through a hostessing service. Sometimes they have servers as an option as well. Determine whether you will be doing any pre-setting or not, any table setup, either inside or outside the space, linens, etc. And then lastly, streamline your vision as much as possible, because this is a textbook, you either spend the time or spend the money situation. So if it is not streamlined, then you're probably gonna need to have either a lot more volunteers or professionals coming in to handle this for you. That's what we have for this week's video, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. Now, if you find yourself kind of floundering with the whole wedding planning thing and you need just a little bit more help than these YouTube videos, might I invite you to come join me over in the master plan. We've helped hundreds, if not thousands of couples go through this process of planning their wedding, with me being your online wedding planner, because each and every single one of you deserve to have a stress-free wedding day. And so if I can help you do that, I'd be more than happy to for less than $1 a day. That's what we have for this week's video, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like the video, jump on down there. That's a bug. Jump on down there, hit the like button, and subscribe to this channel for more traits modern day pride. How about you? Are you doing a flip in your space? You probably are if you watch this whole video. If not, then you must be a real stan. Thanks for sticking around, pal. And if so, tell me about your flip in the comments down below. And until next week, bye, guys.